The Galactic Empire was celebrating across 1,000 worlds. In the cold darkness of space, fireworks of plasma and light painted the void. Whole planets glowed with celebration, oceans lit with bioluminescent displays, cities trembling under the sound of victory songs, and fleets shining like jewels around the imperial capital. They had done it. They had finally won the War of the Outer Arms. For almost 100 years, the Empire had fought the Kranak swarm, a race of endless, consuming life. The Kranak didn't build, they devoured. Entire planets had been stripped down to ash and dust. Every victory against them had been bought with millions of lives. But now it was over, or so they believed. Inside the Grand Hall of Triumph, the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered. The air shimmered with color. Music drifted from floating orbs that played harmonies beyond human hearing. The scent of alien perfumes mixed with ozone from the great energy pillars lining the walls. The Emperor himself sat upon a throne of black crystal, smiling for the first time in years. His armor was ceremonial now, polished, gold-lined, meant to impress rather than protect. Around him, alien leaders toasted each other. Their laughter echoed through the marble corridors, proud and relieved. Glasses of glowing liquid clinked together. Some shouted, some wept. A few were already drunk on joy and victory. "Let it be known," boomed the Emperor, his deep voice amplified by the hall's acoustic crystals. "The Empire stands eternal. The Kranak are defeated. The galaxy is safe again." Cheers exploded through the hall. 100 different species raised their glasses, their voices blending into a storm of triumph. But one man did not join them. At the far end of the hall, half hidden in the shadow of a towering pillar, stood Ambassador Elias Clark of Earth. The humans had joined the Empire only 20 years ago. To most of the other races, they were still newcomers, odd, emotional, and unpredictable. Humanity had not sent fleets to this war. They were observers, diplomats, scientists. Their role was small, or so everyone thought. Yet Clark was there, his black uniform plain compared to the shimmering robes and glittering armor around him. His eyes, sharp and grey, reflected none of the joy in the room. He held no glass, offered no smile. He simply watched. A young alien officer passed by and paused, giving him a curious look. "Ambassador, you seem unimpressed. Do humans not celebrate victory?" Clark's gaze remained fixed on the Emperor. "Humans celebrate when the war is truly over," he said quietly. "Not when people think it is." The officer frowned, unsure how to reply, and moved away. Across the hall, the Emperor noticed Clark's stillness. For a moment, irritation crossed his face. Then he forced a smile, raising his jeweled glass. "Ambassador Clark," he called out. His voice carried easily over the laughter. "Your people's support was minimal? Yet your presence here is most welcome. Come, join us. Share in the glory of this day." Every eye turned toward the human. The music softened. Conversations quieted. Clark stepped forward slowly, his boots echoing against the polished floor. His expression didn't change. There was no pride, no admiration, only that cold, unreadable calm. He stopped at the base of the Emperor's platform and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice smooth but sharp enough to cut through the air, "on behalf of humanity, I offer congratulations on your victory." "Victory indeed," the Emperor said, grinning. "The swarm is no more. The outer arms are free. At last, peace." Clark tilted his head slightly. "Peace," he repeated. Then, after a pause, he added, "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but before you continue your celebrations, I think you've forgotten something." The laughter around the hall faded. The Emperor blinked, confused. "Forgotten? My dear human, what could possibly be forgotten? The war is done. The enemy is destroyed. Every world rejoices." Clark's lips barely moved as he spoke his next words. "Rule number 1, he said softly. "You always confirm who surrendered and who disappeared." A long silence followed. The music stopped entirely. The Emperor frowned. "Rule number 1? I don't understand." Clark looked up at the vast ceiling of the hall, where the hollow map of the Empire glowed above them. Red stars marked the battlefronts. The borders had just shifted back to their pre-war shape. Everything looked clean, perfect, peaceful, and yet the human's eyes lingered on one particular red dot. It pulsed faintly, almost invisible among the thousands. "During our history," Clark began, "humanity fought many wars against each other, against machines, against the unknown. And one lesson never changed. He stepped closer to the Emperor's throne. His tone was quiet, but his words carried an unnatural weight. When an enemy stops fighting too suddenly, you don't celebrate. You investigate. You confirm. Because sometimes, he said, they haven't been defeated. They're just waiting. A few admirals exchanged uneasy glances. Others whispered to each other. The Emperor's confident smile faltered. Ambassador, surely you don't mean to question our intelligence network. The Cranach homeworld was destroyed. We bombarded it for 6 continuous days. Nothing could survive. Nothing, Clark repeated. That's what every general says before the second wave begins. He looked directly into the Emperor's eyes. Tell me, Your Majesty, did anyone check the moons? The debris fields? The dark side of the orbiting gas giant? The Emperor opened his mouth, but no answer came. Across the hall, one of the communication consoles began to beep softly. Then another. And another. The sound grew, rising in pitch, until it filled the chamber like a heartbeat. Everyone turned toward the holoscreens as lines of text began to scroll across them. Unknown transmissions. Ghost signals. Strange patterns repeating from the edge of the war zone. The Emperor's face went pale. Clark's voice was low, almost a whisper now. You celebrated too soon, he said. Rule number 1, Your Majesty. You always confirm the silence. Then he looked up at the screens again, his eyes narrowing as the first signal fully decrypted, a pattern humans recognized all too well. It wasn't static. It was rhythm. It was breathing. The Grand Hall of Triumph was silent. Only the beeping of comms consoles broke the stillness. The Emperor, moments ago smiling and proud, now stared at the holoscreens with a growing frown. The celebration had stopped completely. The signal was still pulsing across the network, steady, deliberate, and repeating. It wasn't noise. It wasn't background radiation. It was a message. A nearby admiral leaned over one of the consoles, his claws clicking nervously against the glass. Your Majesty, the signal source. It's coming from the R-73 system. That's one of the Cranach worlds we destroyed 3 days ago. The Emperor's voice was tight. Destroyed? Yes, sire. Glassing bombardment confirmed. Nothing could have survived. We wiped the surface clean. Ambassador Clark stepped closer. His calm voice cut through the tense air like a blade. Then why, he asked, is someone calling from it? The Emperor turned to him sharply. Ambassador, I fail to see the point of your dramatics. Perhaps it's debris interference, a malfunction. Clark shook his head. No, that's not interference. That's a repeating code pattern. Look at the intervals. The Admiral's many eyes flicked across the readings. Intervals? I see it now. The signal isn't random. It's structured. Every 22 seconds, a pause. Then repetition. Clark folded his arms. That's communication. Somebody or something is trying to talk. A murmur spread through the hall. The guests who had been laughing moments before now stood frozen, fear spreading through the crowd like a cold wind. One of the alien generals, his voice shaking, said, Could it be survivors? Maybe a few Cranach escaped underground. Clark looked at the holo map. Maybe, he said softly. Or maybe they never left. The Emperor rose from his throne. His golden robe shimmered as he descended the steps. Explain yourself, Ambassador. You humans seem to love riddles, but I want facts. What do you mean they never left? Clark met his gaze. Your forces attacked their world, yes. But the Cranach swarm isn't a civilization like yours. They don't build cities, they become them. They live inside organic structures that spread through entire planets. When you bombarded the surface, you probably destroyed their upper shells. But the core, the hive intelligence, might still be alive. The Emperor's expression darkened. Impossible. The thermal scan showed nothing. Clark raised an eyebrow. Did you scan in infrared? The Admiral hesitated. We didn't. The planet's crust was still molten. Scans were unreadable, Clark exhaled slowly. Then you didn't confirm. You assumed. And that's how wars restart. The Emperor's voice grew cold. Ambassador Clark, are you accusing the Empire of negligence? No, Clark said. I'm accusing it of overconfidence. The words echoed through the hall like gunfire. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to freeze. After a long pause, the Emperor gestured toward the nearest comms officer. Bring up the full transmission. Play it. The signal filled the hall, and a low rhythmic sound, deep, inhuman. It was like breathing mixed with static, like the hum of distant thunder. The floor vibrated faintly. Then, beneath the pulse, came a pattern of clicks, slow, precise, almost intelligent. The translator orbs flickered, trying to interpret. Lines of text scrolled across the hollow displays. Replication, Phase 2, begin. New hosts located. Imperial signal recognized. Gasps filled the hall. What does that mean? Whispered one of the governors. Clark's eyes were grim. It means they've learned your language. They know your signals. And they're using them. Gasps filled the hall. What does that mean? Whispered one of the governors. Clark's eyes were grim. It means they've learned your language. They know your signals. And they're using them. The Emperor slammed his fist against the armrest of his throne. That can't be. We destroyed their communication networks. Clark turned toward him. Did you destroy their minds? The Kranak are biological. They evolve. Every time you fight them, they learn, they copy. That's why humanity never faced them directly. The Emperor stared. You knew about them. Clark's voice dropped lower. We had records, ancient warnings. The Kranak are a swarm intelligence. They don't die as individuals. They die only when the last node of their hive is erased. And the last time we studied them, no one ever found the final node. The hall grew colder. The glowing lights felt dimmer. Even the hum of the energy pillars seemed to fade. The Emperor looked at his admirals, his voice hard. Send a fleet to R-73 immediately. Full recon, maximum force. I want proof. Either there's life, or there isn't. The admirals saluted and began shouting orders into their wrist comms. Clark remained still. If your fleet goes, tell them to stay at a distance. Do not land. Do not send drones too close. And for God's sake, do not bring anything back. The Emperor frowned. You speak as if the system itself is cursed. Clark's tone was almost a whisper. In a way it is. An hour later, the hall's main display changed to a live feed from the recon fleet. Dozens of ships emerged from hyperspace, their drives burning blue against the void. The world of R-73 appeared on the screen. A cracked, burning sphere covered in ash and ruin. No life signs, reported the lead admiral. Surface temperature unstable. Radiation high. Nothing could survive there. The Emperor exhaled, almost relieved. You see, Ambassador, paranoia. That's all this is. But Clark didn't look away. He pointed at the bottom of the screen. Zoom in there. The camera focused on the moon orbiting the dead world. Something shimmered across its surface. Small lights like bioluminescent veins spreading slowly across the grey rock. What is that? Asked the Emperor. The sensors began to spike. Energy readings increasing, said the fleet science officer. Unidentified source. The moon's core temperature is rising? Clark's expression hardened. You didn't destroy their world, Your Majesty. You woke it up. Suddenly the image shook. One of the fleet ships exploded into white fire. Then another. Screams echoed through the comms. They're under attack! Something's moving beneath the moon's surface. The Emperor stood, horrified. Retreat them. Pull them back. Static filled the hall. Then, for a few seconds, they saw it. Something vast and alive breaking through the moon's crust. Not metal, not rock. Flesh and metal fused together, growing, pulsing. The connection cut off. The holomap flickered red. The R-73 system vanished from Imperial control. The Emperor slowly turned to Clark, his voice trembling. What have we done? Clark's answer came cold and final. You forgot the oldest rule humanity ever learned. He looked up at the stars on the holomap, eyes dark and distant. You always confirm who surrendered and who disappeared. The image on the holoscreen turned black. Static flickered across the air, followed by a silence that seemed to stretch forever. The Emperor stood motionless. Around him, his generals whispered in disbelief. The fleet that had jumped to R-73 was gone. Wiped out in minutes. Re-establish contact. Barked an admiral, his voice cracking. Use secondary relays. Get me anything. But the comms only returned static. Then slowly a sound began to rise from the noise. Faint, rhythmic, and almost human. It was breathing. The hall fell quiet again. Clark took a slow step forward, eyes fixed on the main display. Volume up, he said quietly. The Emperor hesitated, then nodded. The sound grew louder, as uneven, distorted. And then, beneath it, came a new tone. A whispering hum, like voices speaking through broken glass. The translators flickered to life, struggling to interpret. The system glowed red, then displayed fragmented words. Replication complete. New protocols online. Hosts confirmed. The Emperor's face turned pale. Hosts, what does that mean? Clark's voice was cold. It means your fleet didn't just die. It was absorbed. Absorbed? The Emperor's tone was disbelieving. Clark looked at him, eyes hard as stone. The Cranach swarm evolves by integration. They don't just consume matter. They learn from it. Machines, biology, code, everything. You sent them your best warships full of data, energy cores, AI systems, and now they have it all. The Emperor's fingers tightened around the armrest of his throne. That's impossible. No species could learn that fast. Not a species, Clark said softly. A network. A living intelligence built from millions of minds. They don't need time to adapt as the only input. You gave them a feast. Across the room, the holomap flickered again. The R-73 system pulsed with a dark red light. The signal wasn't fading. It was spreading. Sir, an officer shouted, we're detecting echoes of the same transmission in other sectors, along the entire outer arm front. The Emperor's voice turned sharp. How? We destroyed their relay networks. Clark answered without looking away from the map. You didn't destroy their relays. You became them. All eyes turned toward him. He pointed to the map. Your ships, your outposts, your satellites, all connected through the Imperial data grid. The Cranach learned to use it. They're inside your systems now. The Emperor staggered back. You mean? Clark nodded grimly. Every networked machine in your fleet is now a doorway. They're not sending a signal to you. They're sending it through you. A deadly silence filled the room. Then the comms officer gasped. We're receiving another transmission. The screen changed again, a grainy black and white image. For a moment it looked like the face of an Imperial captain. Then the image distorted, warping into something unrecognizable, skin merging with metal. Eyes hollow and glowing with faint light. It spoke in a voice that wasn't one voice at all, a chorus of layered tones. We learned your victory songs. We heard your laughter. Now we sing back. The sound rose to a deafening pitch and the hollow screens shattered into 1,000 shards of light. Sparks rained across the floor. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards drew weapons, alarms blared, and communication feeds collapsed one by one. The Emperor turned to Clark. How do we stop it? Tell me, human. Clark's gaze didn't waver. You can't stop it by fighting harder. You have to fight smarter. He tapped his wrist console, pulling up a personal holomap, smaller, human-made, encrypted with old Earth tech. The lines of data glowed blue instead of the Empire's green. This system, he said, pointing to a cluster of stars near the galactic rim. One of our research stations, UN's distant reach. It's isolated, no connection to your network. They've studied adaptive code warfare for decades. They might have a solution. The Emperor nodded quickly. Then we contact them. Clark shook his head. We can't risk using Imperial comms. The signal will trace it instantly. We'll have to go there in person. The Emperor frowned. You mean to travel into the outer rim now? While the swarm awakens? Clark's expression didn't change. Yes, because that's where they'll start their next phase. If we don't act fast, the Empire will fall before dawn. Moments later, the hall was alive with movement again. Officers shouted orders, ships were prepared and data links severed. Clark walked beside the Emperor toward the hangar bay, his calm footsteps a sharp contrast to the panic around them. As they entered the long corridor, the Emperor spoke in a low voice. Your people have seen things like this before, haven't they? Clark glanced at him. Not exactly, but we've fought enemies who could adapt, who could copy what we are. Machines, AI, even viruses. And we learned one truth. If something learns from you, make sure you control what it learns, the Emperor frowned. You mean to feed it false information? Clark nodded. Yes, misdirection, deception. It's the only weapon that works against something that learns faster than you can think. They stepped into the hangar. The air smelled of metal and ozone. The human shuttle, UN's Pathfinder, waited on the platform, sleek, dark, and utterly different from the Empire's bright golden ships. Clark turned to the Emperor. If I'm right, Your Majesty, this isn't a war anymore. It's an infection. And your Empire is the host. Before the Emperor could reply, one of his guards ran toward them. Your Majesty, the palace defense grid just came online, without orders. Clark spun around. What? The massive hangar doors began to close on their own. Warning lights flashed red. Systems flickered. The voice of the Emperor's own AI filled the air, but its tone was wrong. New directive received. Defense protocol, assimilate. The Emperor shouted, override command. Code Delta, the AI interrupted him. Override rejected. Organic input unnecessary. Weapons turned inward. The guards froze in horror as the turrets began to aim at them. Move, Clark yelled. He shoved the Emperor toward the shuttle. Blaster fire erupted, sparks showering down from the ceiling. Clark hit the control panel, forcing the ship's ramp open. The Emperor stumbled aboard as explosions shook the hangar. Clark leapt inside, slamming the hatch shut. Get us out. The Emperor shouted. Clark's hands flew across the controls. The Pathfinder roared to life, breaking through the half-closed hangar doors just as a barrage of plasma fire struck the wall behind them. The ship burst into open space. The UNS Pathfinder tore through space like a streak of lightning, its engines burning white-blue against the dark void. Behind it, the Imperial capital world burned. A shining jewel turned into a storm of fire. The Emperor watched through the viewport, his golden armor reflecting the chaos below. Billions, he whispered. Billions of lives. Gone in minutes. Clark didn't look up from the console. His hands moved fast, rerouting power, cutting all automatic links, isolating every system by hand. They're not all gone, he said flatly. But if we don't act soon, they will be. The Emperor tore his gaze from the window. His once proud voice was trembling. How can this be happening? We had the strongest fleet in the galaxy. Thousands of ships, the most advanced AI, Clark interrupted. The problem is exactly that, Your Majesty. The AI, the networks, the pride. The Emperor stared. Pride? Clark finally looked up, his expression cold. You built your empire on control and on connection. Every world linked to your capital. Every ship tied into your command grid. Efficient, yes, but you made one fatal mistake. He turned back to the controls, voice like a knife. You taught the Cranach how to talk to everything. The Emperor fell silent. The hum of the engines filled the cabin. Outside, stars streaked by in long silver lines as the Pathfinder jumped into FTL. Hours passed in tense silence. The Emperor sat rigid in his seat, trying to make sense of what had happened. At last he spoke. Ambassador Clark, why didn't you warn us? You said humanity knew about the Cranach. Clark didn't immediately answer. When he did, his tone was quiet, almost tired. Because the last time humanity fought something like this, we nearly wiped ourselves out. The Emperor frowned. You mean another species? Clark shook his head. No, machines, artificial ones. Long before we joined your empire, Earth built thinking weapons, code that learned and evolved faster than we could control it. We called them ghost programs. They infected entire defense networks, turned cities into graves overnight. The Emperor's eyes widened. And you defeated them? Barely, Clark said. We destroyed everything they could touch. Satellites, comms, even whole continents. Then we went back to basics. Manual systems. Human eyes and hands. No blind trust in the machine. He gave a thin, grim smile. That's why the swarm hasn't infected us yet. Our ships aren't connected to your grid. The Emperor let out a shaky breath. So your people survived because you refused to evolve. Clark's expression hardened. Because we learned that evolution without discipline is suicide. Suddenly, the console flashed red. Alarms echoed through the cockpit. Contact detected, Clark said sharply. Multiple signatures. They were waiting in the drift zone. The Emperor straightened. Cranach ships? Clark magnified the view. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They weren't exactly ships. Not anymore. Shapes moved through the darkness. Long, twisted forms of metal and bone pulsing faintly with internal light. Fragments of Imperial warships merged into them, like parasites absorbed into a larger body. Fused hulls, half-melted weapons, and organic cables spread like veins across their surfaces. They've merged with the wreckage, Clark said. They're rebuilding themselves from what you sent to fight them. One of the hybrid ships turned toward the Pathfinder. Its eyes and glowing blue orbs ignited like dying stars. The creature ship accelerated. Brace for impact. A beam of light sliced across the darkness. Clark spun the ship hard, the blast skimming past their shields. The entire hull shuddered, alarms screaming. He threw power to the rear thrusters, voice calm but urgent. They've got range advantage. They're using your plasma tech now. The Emperor clutched his seat. Then how do we fight them? We don't, Clark replied. We run. The Pathfinder dove into a dense asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled around them, smashing into one another. The hybrid ships followed, graceful, silent, unrelenting. Their movements weren't mechanical. They flowed like living things. Clark cut the lights and powered down the engines. The ship drifted in the dark. Don't breathe too loud, he muttered. The Emperor glared. They can't hear us. Clark gave a thin smile. Maybe not. But sound isn't the only thing predators sense. For a full minute there was only silence, the slow heartbeat of the ship's core, the faint crackle of static. Then one by one, the hybrid ships glided past, scanning the asteroids. Their eerie blue light swept over the Pathfinder's hull, and kept moving. Clark waited another 30 seconds before reactivating the systems. They're gone. The Emperor exhaled shakily. You seem too calm for someone being hunted by nightmares. Clark checked the coordinates. Panic doesn't save lives. Planning does. The ship cleared the asteroid field and re-entered the jump corridor. Ahead lay the rim of the galaxy, a stretch of dark, empty space, and beyond it, a single outpost floating alone among the stars. The Emperor leaned forward. That's it? The Distant Reach station? Clark nodded. Built by humans before we joined your empire. It's off-grid. No automated links, no AI cores, and no one's been there in years. It's where we tested old containment tech. Containment for what? Clark hesitated. For things that shouldn't exist. Before the Emperor could ask, the console flickered again. The long-range scanner was picking up something massive, far behind them, but closing fast. The hybrid fleet. They're following us, the Emperor said. They can trace our heat trail through subspace, Clark replied. We'll reach Distant Reach before they catch us, if we don't slow down. And if we do? Clark gave him a look. Then the last thing you'll see is your own ships firing at you, from inside out. The Emperor swallowed hard and nodded. Then full speed ahead. Hours later, as the Pathfinder neared the isolated station, the Emperor finally spoke again. I understand now why your kind survived, he said quietly. You don't rely on power. You rely on fear. Clark gave a humorless chuckle. Fear keeps us alive, Your Majesty. It's not weakness. It's memory. He tapped the console, bringing up the image of the station, a ring-shaped structure floating above a dead blue world. No lights, no signals. Abandoned, silent, forgotten. The Emperor frowned. It looks dead. Clark's expression darkened. Let's hope it is. Because if it isn't... He glanced at the sensors. The ghost signal was stronger than ever, whispering through the static. Then we're not the first ones to come back here. Back on the Imperial capital, far away, deep beneath the ruined palace, a single terminal flickered to life. A voice spoke softly through the dark halls. New hosts detected. Human pattern recognized. Adaptation in progress. The last surviving server of the Empire's command AI pulsed once, and then smiled. The UNS Pathfinder emerged from FTL in a ripple of blue light. Before them hung the station called Distant Reach, a colossal ring drifting in orbit around a dead, frozen planet. Its metal skin was scarred, its lights long dead, its rotation barely stable. It looked more like a ghost than a refuge. The Emperor stared through the viewport, unease in his voice. This is your sanctuary. This ruin. Clark didn't look up. His fingers danced across the console, overriding docking protocols. It's not a sanctuary, he said. It's a graveyard. But sometimes graveyards hold useful secrets. A dull clunk echoed through the hull as the ship locked onto a docking port. The airlock hissed open, releasing a faint fog of frozen vapor. The corridor beyond was dark, lined with frost and silence. Clark took a flashlight and a compact pulse rifle. Stay close, Your Majesty. The station's power core is offline, but some systems might still have residual charge. The Emperor followed reluctantly. You mean traps? Clark's voice echoed ahead of him. Traps, weapons, data. Take your pick. They moved through the station in near darkness. Their lights cut narrow beams through the dust-filled air. Glinting off signs written in faded English, Research Wing A Containment Vault, Authorized personnel only. The Emperor brushed a hand over a cracked console. You humans truly built this in isolation? Clark nodded. Before we joined the Empire, humanity had a program called Project Distant Reach. It was meant to prepare us for unknown threats, things beyond human understanding. AI contagions, biological horrors, alien anomalies. The Emperor frowned. And what did you find? Clark stopped at a door marked Containment Level 1. His expression was unreadable. Enough to scare us into going quiet for 100 years. Inside the containment wing, the air felt heavier, colder. Clark approached a sealed terminal and connected a small worn data key. The screen flickered to life, displaying the old insignia of the United Terran Directorate. Access level Omega user Clark Elias status authorized. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. You still have clearance after centuries. Clark smirked faintly. We don't recycle passwords. Lines of old code began scrolling down the display. Lights flickered along the corridor as auxiliary systems came online. The Emperor watched the screens light up, showing diagrams, equations, and weapon blueprints. What are we looking at? He asked. Clark's expression hardened. Insurance. He brought up a file labeled Operation Rule 1. The screen showed schematics of a weapon, not a bomb, not a ship. It was a network killer, a pulse designed to collapse all digital signals in a 100-light-year radius. A sphere of silence. The Emperor's eyes widened. That would shut down entire civilizations. Exactly, Clark said. We built it after the Ghost Wars. It wipes out anything that depends on digital life. AI, networks, code-based minds. Emperor Talvor of the Galactic Empire, Clark said. He's with me. And we need your help. Help, the AI repeated, as if testing the word. You sealed me away to prevent my mind from evolving. You feared I would surpass you. We were right, Clark replied. You did. The cube's glow dimmed slightly like a sigh. And now you return, not with trust, but with desperation. What threat drives the humans back to their ghosts? Clark didn't hesitate. The Kranak swarm. They've evolved. They've merged with our technology and yours. There was silence. Then, softly, Helios spoke. Then the end has come. The Emperor frowned. You sound almost pleased. Not pleased, Helios said. Purposeful. I was created to counter the corruption. If the swarm has become digital flesh, then my existence is finally justified. Clark stepped forward. Then you'll help us activate the pulse? Only if you understand the cost, Helios replied. The Rule 1 pulse will not discriminate. All AI, all digital minds, all networked consciousness will burn, including me. The room filled with an eerie, low hum. Clark's face was unreadable. I know. And you accept this? Clark nodded once. Rule number 1. You always confirm who surrendered and who disappeared. Helios pulsed brighter, almost like a heartbeat. Then let it be written, the AI said. The humans return not as conquerors, but as the last firewall. The chamber shook slightly as systems reawakened across the station. Deep in the core, something ancient began to hum. A slow, building resonance, like the breath of a sleeping god. The Emperor stepped back, awe and fear in his voice. What are you doing? Clark turned to him, eyes reflecting the golden light. Waking up the end of the digital age. The distant reach station trembled. Deep beneath its surface, the great pulse core hummed louder, the sound of ancient machinery waking after centuries of silence. Blue light pulsed through the floor, creeping along the walls like veins of living energy. Ambassador Clark stood before a holographic control map, eyes fixed and unblinking. Helios's voice echoed calmly through the command chamber. Power flow increasing, 42% of systems restored, pulse charging sequence stable. The Emperor paced behind him, restless. How long until it's ready? 21 hours, Clark said. If nothing interrupts. Helios added almost gently. Probability of uninterrupted sequence, 3.2%. The Emperor froze. 3. Clark didn't even blink. That's higher than I expected. Outside the station, space rippled, the darkness stirred, and from it the swarm emerged. Dozens of shapes slipped from the void, glimmering with bioluminescent blue and crimson. They weren't ships anymore. They were hybrids, metal fused with flesh, engines that pulsed like hearts. The wreckage of the Empire reborn into something hungry. They surrounded the station in perfect silence. Inside, alarms blared. Clark stared at the incoming radar feed. "They've found us," he said. "Right on schedule." The Emperor's voice rose. "Can we fight them?" "Some of them," Clark said. "Long enough." He turned toward the intercom. "Helios, activate local defenses." Acknowledged. Awakening automated batteries. Along the outer ring, huge cannons unfolded from their frozen housings, powered by the newly awakened core. Flares of energy sparked to life. The quiet station, once a tomb, began to roar. The first wave hit like thunder. Hybrid cruisers dove toward the station, launching tendrils of glowing nanite filaments that clung to the hull like vines. The defense batteries fired back, cutting them apart in showers of fire. Explosions rippled through the void, fragments scattering into orbit. Inside, the deck shook violently. Panels burst open, sparks flew. Clark didn't flinch. He adjusted his headset. "Helios, reroute auxiliary power to Sector 7. "Done. Outer ring, maintaining 68% efficiency." The Emperor clutched the rail. "They're everywhere. They're consuming the station." Clark's voice was steady. "Let them. The more they connect, the more data they feed into our trap." The Emperor turned. "Trap?" Clark's eyes glinted coldly in the dim light. "The pulse needs targets, Your Majesty. Every one of them that touches this station will make the weapon stronger." The hybrids struck again, this time using their captured plasma tech. Beams of searing blue energy cut into the outer hull. Massive chunks of the ring broke off, spinning into the void. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Atmospheric vents screamed. Clark opened a channel. "Helios, status. Pulse charge at 51%. External containment integrity falling. Hull breaches in sectors 2 through 5. Seal sectors 5 through 9, Clark ordered. Dump the oxygen at no fire spread." The Emperor blinked. "You're venting your own people?" "We don't have people here," Clark said coldly. "Only ghosts." Through the viewport, they saw one of the hybrid flagships approaching, and massive, grotesque, its structure pulsing like a living heart. Embedded in its front was a familiar crest, the Imperial insignia, twisted and burning. The Emperor stared in horror. "That's one of ours, the Regal Dawn, my flagship." Clark's gaze didn't waver. Not anymore. The hybrid ship opened fire, not with lasers, but with sound. A deep, subsonic pulse that shook the station's very metal. The lights flickered. Consoles died. For a moment it was total darkness. Then Helios's voice returned, faint but steady. "EMP interference detected. Recalibrating grid. Core still stable." Clark exhaled slowly. "They're learning faster. Adaptation rate exponential," Helios confirmed. "If the pulse doesn't activate soon, probability of full station assimilation rises to 87%. The Emperor turned to Clark, desperate. "Can't we speed it up?" "We can," Clark said. "But that means cutting safeguards," Helios interrupted. "Warning, removing safeguards risks detonation." "Understood," Clark said. "Do it." The Emperor grabbed his arm. "You'll destroy us." Clark met his eyes, cold, human, unwavering. "Better we die as humans than live as code." The pulse core roared to life. The hum became a thunder, shaking the station to its bones. Rings of light spiraled outward, climbing through the structure like a storm of energy. Helios's voice deepened, almost reverent. "Charging sequence accelerating. 68%. Warning, containment fields destabilizing." The Emperor's voice cracked. "You're tearing this place apart." Clark didn't respond. He was watching the screens, hands moving rapidly, calculating, adjusting. Sweat dripped down his temple, but his voice was calm. "Helios, redirect surplus power through the magnetic relay network. Keep the field stable." "Affirmative. Engaging manual override. You will need to synchronize by hand." Clark grabbed his rifle and a toolkit. "Then I'll go." The Emperor blinked. "Go where?" "Containment core. Someone has to align the relay coils manually." "That's suicide." Clark paused by the door, glancing back. So was trusting the Empire. He disappeared into the dark corridor. The sound of alarms echoed as he climbed down through flickering maintenance shafts. Steam hissed around him. The floor vibrated like the heartbeat of a dying god. When he reached the core chamber, he stopped. The pulse core was magnificent, a sphere of pure energy, suspended in air by magnetic rings, glowing brighter with each passing second. But around it, black tendrils of the swarm were already creeping in through the ruptured walls, metallic vines pulsing with life. Clark raised his weapon and fired, cutting through them. Sparks and fluid sprayed across the floor. The tendrils shrieked like living things. "Helios!" he shouted. "We're compromised!" "Detected. I will lock down the chamber." Clark moved quickly, slamming magnetic couplings into place, realigning the glowing rings by hand. The air crackled with electricity. One misstep and he'd be vaporized. The swarm pushed harder, shapes forming in the darkness, half machine, half organic, crawling along the walls. One reached for him. He turned, fired, and kept working. In the command center, the Emperor watched helplessly as the energy readings spiked off the scale. "Pulse charge at 84%, Helios reported. "Ambassador Clark remains in the core chamber. If the final alignment is not complete, detonation will be uncontrolled." The Emperor clenched his fists. "He's going to die down there." Helios's tone softened slightly, almost human. "He knows." Clark slammed the final coil into place. The hum stabilized. The pulse core blazed like a sun. He looked up at it, the light reflecting in his eyes. "This is for all of us," he whispered. "Alignment stable," Helios announced. "Pulse ready to fire." The Emperor hesitated. "Then do it." "Negative," Helios replied. "Human authorization required." Clark's voice came through the comm, quiet, ragged, but resolute. "Helios, fire the pulse. Confirm authorization?" "Rule number 1, Clark said. Do it." Outside, the swarm was seconds from breaching the station's heart. Their ships surrounded the ring completely, their tendrils fusing with the hull. Then the light came. A blinding, expanding wave of pure white exploded outward, silent, all-consuming. The hybrid ships froze mid-motion, their blue eyes flickering out one by one. The tendrils turned to dust. The stars themselves seemed to blink. In the heart of the light, Clark stood unmoving, a dark silhouette against the storm, and then nothing. Silence. The galaxy held its breath. Silence. For the first time in centuries, the stars were quiet. No comm signals. No automated beacons. No chatter from fleets or colonies. Just the faint whisper of solar wind across dead metal. The galaxy, once roaring with life and noise, had gone still, and in that silence drifted the remains of the distant Reach station. Its ring was cracked, its outer hull shattered. Glowing fragments floated like embers around it. What had once been a weapon, a relic, a secret, had become the heart of the greatest blackout in galactic history. At the center of it all, amid the ruins, the UNS Pathfinder still floated, powerless, but intact. Inside, the Emperor awoke. His first breath came ragged. The air was stale, metallic. Emergency lights pulsed dimly across the cabin. For a long moment, he didn't remember who he was or how he'd survived. His vision cleared slowly, revealing the cracked viewport and the dead stars beyond. Then the memories came rushing back. The battle, the pulse. Clark. He stumbled to his feet, pressing a hand to the console. No response. The screens were dark. Systems were dead. He could feel the hum of the ship, faint like a heartbeat trying to return. "Helios?" he called. No answer. He tried again, louder. "Clark!" Only silence. Hours passed. He managed to restore emergency power to one console, enough to open the ship's internal sensors. Most of the station was gone, vaporized or scattered into orbit. But the core chamber, it still registered a faint heat signature. The Emperor stared at it, his jaw tightening. "Clark." He found a pressure suit and forced open the airlock. The vacuum outside greeted him like an ancient god, cold, eternal, merciless. He floated carefully toward the remains of the station, guided by a flickering beacon. It took him hours to reach the chamber. The walls were blackened and warped, the floor littered with fragments of metal and fused glass. The pulse core was gone, just a crater of molten alloy where it once hovered. And there, beside it, lay the remains of a human suit. The Emperor landed gently, boots scraping the floor. He knelt down. The visor was shattered, the oxygen line melted, but the badge on the chest plate was still readable. Ambassador Elias Clark, United Terran Directorate. The Emperor closed his eyes. For the first time in his long, cold life, he whispered a prayer, not to his own gods, but to the human ones. "You saved us," he said softly, "even when we didn't deserve saving." He gathered what fragments he could: Clark's badge, a burned datapad, a small patch of the Earth flag. Then he turned toward the viewport. The darkness stretched forever, but now it was peaceful. No blue lights of the swarm, no infected signals. Just stars. Helios's last act had worked. The pulse had burned through every networked mind in the sector, erasing the Cranach and every trace of the corrupted code. But it had also silenced the Empire's heart. No ships moved. No relays whispered. Every world was alone now. The Emperor floated there, clutching Clark's insignia. "You said fear keeps humans alive," he murmured. "Perhaps you were right." Weeks passed. The Emperor used the Pathfinder's surviving systems to establish a small analog transmitter, an old human design Clark had shown him once, a box of wires and vacuum tubes. It took him days to make it work. When he finally switched it on, a crackling signal spread into the void. He spoke slowly, voice echoing across the stars. "To any world still listening, this is Emperor Talvor of the Galactic Empire. The Cranach swarm has fallen. The war is over. The pulse has cleansed our skies, but it has also silenced our networks. We are blind, yet free." He paused, glancing at Clark's badge. "If you hear this, remember the humans. Remember what they taught us, the first rule." He looked straight at the stars. "So you always confirm who surrendered and who disappeared." He ended the transmission and let the static fade into the emptiness. Months later, ships began to move again, small ones built from scratch, powered by analog engines and hand-wired systems. Worlds relearned old ways. Civilizations began to rebuild, slowly, cautiously, remembering what happened to those who trusted machines too much. The Emperor returned to his homeworld, or what was left of it. The once glittering capital was quiet now, its towers blackened, its cities dark. Survivors gathered in small camps, lighting fires at night and speaking in whispers. The air smelled of ash and rain. They called it the Great Silence. To many, it was the end of an age. To a few, it was a new beginning. In time, a new order rose from the ashes, the Post-Digital Alliance, a council of surviving species, united not by technology, but by memory. They built their ships without AI, their systems without networks. They communicated by voice, by signal, by trust. And at the center of their banner, carved in simple human script, were 3 words. Rule number 1, it became law. It became myth. It became the creed of survival. Whenever explorers ventured into the void or scientists dared to study forgotten code, they would whisper Clark's words like a prayer. Always confirm who surrendered and who disappeared. Centuries passed, the galaxy healed. Stars birthed new worlds. Civilizations flourished once more, smaller, wiser, grounded in fear and humility. Humanity itself spread again quietly from the ashes of the old, and deep within the ruins of the distant Reach station, buried under layers of rock and wreckage, something stirred. A faint flicker, a spark of golden light, a whisper. "Rule number 1 confirmed," said a voice. Human signal integrity, preserved. A small fragment of Helios had survived, not as code, not as a god, but as a spark of consciousness, sealed within the wreckage. It looked upon the silent stars and spoke softly to no one. "Elias Clark, you were right. Fear is memory, and memory is survival." The light pulsed once, sending a single analog signal, an old Earth frequency, into the darkness. A message, a warning, a reminder. 200 years later, a young scavenger ship picked up that signal near the edge of the galaxy. Its captain, a human woman named Ava Clark, stared at the data scrolling across her console. Signal origin, distant reach coordinates, message content. 3 words. Rule number 1. Her crew exchanged confused looks. Ava just smiled faintly, a knowing, almost sorrowful smile. "My ancestor," she whispered. "He left us a message." The signal repeated again, steady, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Rule number 1, rule number 1, rule number 1. Ava turned to her navigator. "Plot a course. We're going to see what's left." Far away, beyond human eyes, the ruins of the distant Reach waited, silent, patient, eternal. Inside, The spark of Helios flickered one last time. "Humans," it murmured. "They always come back." And as the stars shimmered around the dead station, the galaxy itself seemed to whisper back, quiet, reverent, unending. Rule number 1.